is about the red-backed woodpecker. So we had what we call the golden-backed woodpecker in the northern half of the country. So like in Mana and Jaffna, you see the golden-back. In Colombo, you see the red-back. They were treated as subspecies. And the question was, are they subspecies or are they different species? Now if you look at woodpeckers in this genus called Dinopium and look at the golden backs, so you can see that with the one on the left, the Himalayan flameback, okay, so you can see, okay, golden back and it's got its own range. You're not going to confuse it with anything else. Common flameback, okay, you can see, okay, there's a population in the Western Ghats. And then the uncertainty was around what's called the black-crowned flameback, which is another name for the red-backed woodpecker, or what we used to call the red-backed woodpecker. So the question was, are these really subspecies? And the answer is no, and there are two different ways this has been looked at. So there's the molecular phylogenetics approach, which looks at building a family tree and figuring out there are different species. And the other approach is something called the Tobias criteria. So recently, after 25 years of work on the Handbook of the Birds of the World, Joseph Del Hoyo and Nigel Collar brought out a 2-volume book called Illustrated Checklist of the Birds of the World. Unfortunately, it's an expensive set of books, it's about €300, but for the first time in the history of humankind, all 10,000 plus species of birds are illustrated in one set of books. And one of the things they looked at was this issue of, is something a subspecies or a species? And this is something they had looked at during the entire Handbook of the Birds of the World. And they use this thing called the Tobias criteria, where, as you can see on the first column, so they look at 5 things: biometrics, the acoustics, the plumage, ecology, and the geographical relationship. And for each of them, they look at particular characters, and then they give a scoring system. So if you have 2 things that are supposed to be subspecies, and the calls are very, very different, you give them a certain score. If they are very similar, you give them a lower score. Then you look at what's called a hybridization zone. So with the red-back and the golden-back, the birds hybridize, but it's a very narrow zone. So around sort of Kalpitiya area, you find that you have intermediate grades. So when they did the scoring for the red-backed woodpecker, they got a total score of 9. And what they have found is that if the score is sort of 7, 8 or more, that suggests that these are actually different species when you take a number of factors. So it's sort of like a balanced scorecard, that you use in corporate reporting. And Sampath Senaratne and his team, they looked at the genetics and they came to the same conclusion. And you find this has happened with a number of birds, that the Tobias criteria comes up with a score which is often supported by the molecular phylogenetics as well. So the two go hand in hand. As a result of all this work, there has been some changes in how scientists classify birds, and that impacts the Sri Lankan endemics as well. So I'll just I'm keeping this in my presentation for reference. I don't want to go through all of the detail, but there are some interesting things like, we thought there's a family of barbets only in Africa and Asia. So now they're saying, well, actually, the Asian barbets are very different from the African barbets, and then different bird families altogether. There are some surprising results, like the yellow-eyed Babbler is moving into a family which the bird watchers know as the Warblers. But if you hear the yellow-eyed Babbler singing, its call is so different from its song is so different from other babblers you recognize it probably is more like a warbler. So at the last count we have 34 species of endemic birds. But I was speaking to Dr. Sampath Sinharaja recently, and he says there's at least another 2 that they're working on, which they will probably publish as endemics. I don't want to steal his thunder, so I'm not going to say what they are. Okay, now let's just move more into the fun bird watching side of things, and the recreational side, and also the commercial side. So where do you find them? The best places are actually in the wet zone, because, as I said before, our wet zone forests, both in the lowlands and the highlands, have been separated from India. It's almost as if there was an ocean between them. Even when there was a land bridge connecting them, that dry zone land bridge worked as a barrier. And some rainforest species are so sensitive, they don't even like to cross a road. So if it's an endemic you're after, then you need to go to where an island has been isolated for millions and millions of years, and this is the wet zone, where you have forest patches like Bodhnagar, which is actually not too far from Colombo, and Sinharaja. With good road access, even Sinharaja is only 3 hours away. And there's Kitulgala, which is a mid-elevation forest, and it connects up with Horton Plains and Peak Wilderness. So it's what's called altitudinally graded forest. So it's again a sort of an elevational bridge. And as you go higher in mountains, the species diversity does reduce. Then you find you have special mountain endemics as well. Okay? So now let's go on a little endemic bird watching tour for the last part of the talk. Now, I appreciate there are some people here who might be in the 34 club. You've seen all 34 species of endemic birds, especially some of the people in the audience who are professional bird watching guides, actually under serious pressure to show all 34 endemics sometimes in the space of 10 days. So although on one hand it's like great to have a job where you're paid to go and see wildlife and see leopards, elephants, blue whales and endemics all in the space of 10 days, there's tremendous pressure as well. One little caveat on the slides, the maps you see are very loose. Can I just double check, can people at the back hear me okay? Raise your hands if you can hear me. Okay, great. Okay. Now this is a very different situation to, say, Europe, where people have phone apps and they put their bird records using a phone app, goes into a database. So this is a book that the London Bird Club did. And there were 502 distribution maps of the birds recorded within 20 miles of St. Paul's Cathedral. And the maps are incredibly detailed. This book used over 1 million bird records, and it tells you which 1 kilometer quadrat the bird has been recorded or not, and estimated the numbers, the changes between the previous time span and the current time span. And citizen science is very compelling and powerful. There's a similar app called eBird India, and the Indians are also very, very good, because Indians have, like 3 phones. I mean, if you meet the bird is there, they tend to be male. So 1 phone for the home, 1 phone for the office, 1 home, another phone for the girlfriend, and maybe even a 4th one for their bird records or whatever. So they have millions and millions of records, and they do some incredible this kind of graphical work as well. So we might as well start in Colombo. As this is where we are. You might think Colombo is not such a great place for seeing endemics. Actually, that's not true. I mean, there are a few endemics you can pick up here. So the Ceylon small barbet, for instance, it's actually a tiny bird. It's like a sparrow-sized bird. But if you know what to look for, you might even see it in the BMI stage grounds. I've certainly heard it in the cathedral grounds, and Gregory's Road, I'm forgetting the names of some of these roads now, but the road that runs near Vidyamarmata, this is all the hot spot for Ceylon small barbet, an endemic, a special bird found nowhere else in the world. And I've been talking about the red-black woodpecker, which has been elevated. So I've had visitors over on Sunday, and I could hear this bird. On Saturday, I walked to Lankan, went along beautiful Crested, and there was an amazingly beautiful male red-black woodpecker. Not really bothered about my presence. And if you go to places like Kalangama, you might see the Ceylon swallow, another endemic. They often collect mud. So that's actually 3 endemics. But if you really want to get a good clutch of endemics, then go to Sinharaja. I know the WNPS have run day trips to Sinharaja, so if anyone hasn't seen many of these endemics, I would recommend you tell the committee to run another day trip to Sinharaja. So you leave at 6 in the morning, by 9:30, you'll be there, and you'll start seeing a lot of these. So for me, a morning in Sinharaja usually starts around 5 a.m. and I hear this beautiful song, very sort of sweet and lilting and very varied, and that's a spot-pink thrush singing. It's a ground thrush, so quite often it's sort of foraging on the ground, and sometimes in the mornings it comes onto the main road, and then as the sun comes up, it retreats into the shade. So it's like some of these Colombo ladies who want to be worried about not getting too much of sun. And this is another thrush. It's a devilishly hard bird. It sort of creates a lot of stress for the professional birding tour leaders, the Scaly Thrush. Not hugely attractive, always richly patterned, but the birders love these thrushes because taxonomy is also very uncertain. Is it an endemic or is it not? The debate continues. Very, very shy bird, found in very dense, dark undergrowth. And people like Ajit and Atula have done great work in getting these images. It's also found in the highlands, so it goes all the way up to Cotton Plains. Then, just as, so I usually start my day at a place like Martin's in Sinharaja, which is very basic, but I love the place. And while it's still dark, the blue magpies come in, and I think the Sinhalese name translates into something like the dancers of the forest, and they come and they chatter, and the lighting isn't good enough to take photographs at that time, but they have now become habituated to people. When I first started bird watching, I needed about 7 or 8 trips if I could see my first blue magpie, whereas now it's become so much easier. And then you hear the spurfowl calling, a bird you hear everywhere. You could be in Sinharaja or in Huntilla, and you can hear this bird calling. You will hear it in small pockets of forest on the way to Kandy as well. But it is very, very difficult, very shy. They will, you're lucky if you see one even dart across the road. And then you have the Ceylon-crested Drongo, which we talked about earlier. So this is a bird you want to listen for. Is it making that flock gathering call? Sometimes it imitates other birds. Very handsome, very intelligent bird. And the Ceylon Babblers, which we met before, which are like the core of these bird waves. And with the Rufous Babblers, if a good quality flock is formed, you start to see this Ashy-headed Laughingthrush. Sometimes they get into the mid-canopy, like what this bird is doing. Then you get a chance to see it. You see that ashy head and the brown body, but quite often it's so dark you can't even quite make out the bird. You see the sort of white, surprise-looking face. And here's a simple babbler, which is much easier to see. It's sort of in the canopy. It keeps its chorus of bubbling calls, and it really sort of uplifts the whole day. Now here's a bird that is high on the desired list, the green-billed cuckoo, another endangered bird, likes this sort of bamboo forest. So you still get them in Bodhinavala, but places like Sinharaja and Bird is the best place. 20 years ago, it was almost a mythical bird. And then Martin Vijay Singha, who began life as a forest department laborer and then went on to becoming the first birding lodge operator in the country, came across a pair that was nesting, and he wrote it up. Because he'd been trained by P. Karnaratna, the greatest field naturalist possibly that Sri Lanka has ever had. So I wrote it up and sent it to Folktale, and it probably was the first paper published in Folktale by a Sri Lankan. And Folktale ranks amongst the top 3 ornithological journals in terms of the citation index for tropical birds. So it just shows that what you can achieve if you're willing to take the trouble to make notes. Now, we all have an idea of what a cuckoo is, but in this slide I'm going to explain that cuckoos are actually very diverse. There's a pied cuckoo, then you have the Atikukula, which is also kind of cuckoo, it's a ground cuckoo. And then you have the circular malkuha. Now, malkuhas are usually associated with tall canopy, but this malkuha actually likes to sort of run along the ground and feed. And then there's the common cuckoo, the grey bird, which is what most people's idea of a cuckoo is. The common cuckoo there is actually was not photographed in Sri Lanka. That is calling. Calling is this mystery cuckoo that somebody 5 years ago started putting out mealworms, and it's sort of become habituated, and it allows photographers to get close. And here's the red-faced malkuha, which is also a member of the cuckoo family, but as you know, very special. Tends to keep to the tall canopy, so you can miss it if you don't know that when there's a flock, you've got to look at different levels. So if you're not doing that, you might miss the red-faced malkuha. And as I said, the barrier, the Sinharaja Bird Wave acts like a superorganism, and there are different bird waves that form in different parts of the forest, and they have their routine. So so like you have these people who have the routine that at 6 p.m. they'll be doing their walk on Valley Park or what it is, and cross the road at 6:10 p.m. or something. The guides get to know the individual flocks, and they will say, our barrier flock will cross this way at 4 p.m. and then again at 6 p.m. or whatever. And then okay, if you position yourself, and there's the order of crossing as well. So the orange-billed babblers would cross, and then the ashy-headed Laughingthrushes scamper across, and then each one has a sequence. And the red-faced malkuhas are amongst the last to cross, and they're also crossing high up in the canopy. So everything works according to your plan. When you're looking at the flocks, you need to listen out the calls of another endangered endemic, the white-faced starling. These birds travel around a lot because starlings are strong flyers, and the best way to pick them out is by that single note loud call, and again quite high up, although any of these fruit eaters might descend low when things like Bovita plants are in fruit. Layard's parakeet is an easy bird to get. It's very noisy, very gregarious. They're sort of screeching past you. It's not only found in the wet zone, so if you go to Nilgala, Galoya, you find that you have riverine habitat. The Layard's parakeet is found. It's not showing on the map I have, because, as I said before, the maps are not very granular. So there are two hill miners in Sri Lanka. So the southern hill miner is found only in southern India and Sri Lanka, so it's a subcontinental endemic. The Ceylon hill miner is endemic just Sri Lanka. Sinharaja is a very good place. You often hear them calling, and quite a bit of the in sort of mid elevations are also quite good for seeing the Ceylon hill miner. And after a while, you learn their calls, but not an easy bird to get close to or to get a photograph. The hanging parrot is much easier to see. It's got a very shrill call, small bird, and it loves to come out of the little palms. So when we were driving up that hill to Martin's Lodge, you see this. It's an amazingly attractive bird. And I remember Rukshandra Wadana telling me that I think in the late 1970s or early 80s, he could even see them down Ward Place. So again, it just shows that, bit by bit, habitat is being lost, and we've lost some of these birds. And what will be amazing is that there's a rainforest reforestation project close to Colombo, and a few hundred acres were planted up as rainforest. Because these birds travel, and some of them might find their way here, and we might bring some of these endemics back to the capital. Crimson-backed Flameback is very distinctive. You can see that pale bill, and the call is very distinctive, very shrill and winning. Again, the lowland rainforests are a very good place, but if you go to places like Horton Plains as well, you will see it. The female is at the bottom with black head and white dots, and the male is on top with a smart red cap. And you find this in a lot of woodpeckers. It must be something to do with one of the ancestors and the DNA, that the females have these sort of black and white heads, and the males have red caps. It's not the dainty little endemic that you see. So the Legge's Flowerpecker is obviously a very close relative of the Tittle's Flowerpecker, which you hear and see in Colombo. So if any of you have fruit trees around where you live, you probably hear these birds early in the morning. Sometimes they occupy, not the Legge's, the Tittle's Flowerpecker, you hear them on the TV antenna singing away. And this is the endemic counterpart. The Ceylon Swallow is special because there's a time when we thought everything about Sri Lankan birds was known, and then Deepal Barakaguda, who's been leading birding tours for a long time, is a very accomplished ornithologist, discovered a new species. It seemed so incredible that in a country that had so many, that had a history of bird watchers, could have this undiscovered owl. And it turns out that in places like Moropedia, you find when you walk, there seems to be a bird almost every 100 to 200 meters at times. They like secondary growth, and it seems that legs are evolved so that it can perch on thin vertical secondary growth. So the secondary forest may actually confer an advantage in how it perches and it hunts at that low level. Since it was discovered, everybody in Sinharaja knows about the Ceylon Swallow, and all the guys know the bird, and when they get to know you, they will get on their mobile. The mobile for calling bird is not the one for calling girlfriend. They'll call you, and then they'll tell you there's a Ceylon in view, come and photograph it. We have another endemic owl, the Chestnut-backed Owlet. You might think all owls are nocturnal birds. Certainly in folklore and poetry, that's what they are. But this bird is actually active diurnally during the day. And quite often you hear it calling, and that gives it away. Again, another endemic that's found across the entire red zone, from the lowlands, from places like Woodpecker, increasing elevation to Sinharaja, and then all the way up to Horton Plains. So Sinharaja tour will mop up a lot of the endemics, but there are still a few where you need to travel higher up into the mountains to get. So things like the yellow-fronted barbet, you can't hear it and see it in Sinharaja, but it really is a common bird when you get in the mountains. And for me, it's like the acoustic signature for Sri Lanka's highlands. So when you're staying in a highland forest on a tea estate and you're in this sort of tea bungalow having a nice cup of Ceylon tea on the veranda, you hear this bird's call echoing across the valleys, and it really is very evocative. If you look at the bottom picture, you can see the ring-tail bristles. Now, this kind of thing is usually found in insect-eating birds like nightjars and swifts and frogmouths. Now, why does the barbet need those ring-tail bristles? I'm not so sure, but it must serve a similar purpose, or maybe it's because they nest in burrows where it's dark and they need some other sensory mechanism. Ceylon Woodpigeon is the kind of bird that you go to Hagdala Gardens or Portland Plains to see. But pigeons are strong flyers, and they do altitudinal migrations. So sometimes they descend low, places like Sinharaja, so they go where the food is. So they are economic migrants. And they need to feed and they're on the move. This is a very special bird. It's called the arenga. Another bird that is almost like mythical, and when I was growing up, I was told fishing hut is the place, and then arenga pool became well known. So when you enter Portland Plains National Park, there's a pool of water on the right-hand side, and it's become internationally famous because people turn up early morning with their telescopes and cameras and tripods in the way for this arenga to show itself. It's a distinct thrush. It's a very interesting bird. They have patterns which are best seen in ultraviolet light, so you might think that they look quite dull and drab, but in UV light, they have very strong contrasted plumages, and a lot of animals can see in UV light. So, and in the kind of dense sort of stream-side vegetation where little light gets through, the UV signaling probably helps them in pairs identifying each other and knowing which sex they are. So you see the female is brown, doesn't have as much of that UV signaling as the male does. But there's another interesting thing that it does, and this picture here by Neeraj Perera shows capturing vertebrae. Why is it a big deal? Because it's in the family called the Musicapidae, which are flycatchers. So it's quite unusual that birds that eat many flies will be insecting, capturing vertebrate prey. And this was first recorded in a paper by Amarasinghe and others, where they watched a distant thrush eating a lizard. Finally, the black-throated Munia, which was at one time considered an endemic, maybe more work on genetics might re-establish whether is it an endemic or not. Again, it tends to be a bird found mainly in the highlands. Portland Plains is a good place to go and look for it. And that sort of very nearly brings us to the end of the tour. And we'll finish off with a couple of more montane endemics. And the Ceylon bush warbler. The bush warbler was always believed to be an endemic, very much a highland bird. Difficult to see as it skulks around, but it's got these contact calls, and after a while you sort of learn to pick it out, and with the patience you can see it. This has, again, a bit of sexual dimorphism. The male and female have different colored eyes. Not pronounced dimorphism, but maybe the female sort of says, I like the look in his eyes. And here's the Ceylon white-eye, again doing something.